Today on Tree Talk, we're talking environmental education, so stay tuned, we'll be right back. Hello everyone, welcome to Tree Talk. As my normal intro would say, Duane Rigsby and Dave Apsley, but as you can tell, Dave Apsley's not here today. We have him out on special assignment or something like that. We have Jamie Dahl from Central State, and Jamie, you were on a show once before.
I was.
Could you just fill us in a little bit about what you do there at Central State and how long and all this stuff you've been there?
Sure, yeah, so thanks Duane. I am the Forest Outreach Coordinator at Central State. And so just kind of a little recap on some of what happens at Central State. It's another one of our land grant institutions, so now our second one in Ohio, and it is newer to that. So it was 2014 that it was designated as a land grant, and so it's called an 1890s institution, and of course similar to Ohio State, really focusing on teaching, research, and extension, that kind of three-tiered mission. And I would say a big focus of that as well at Central State is to try to serve the underserved. So really try to pay attention to audiences that we're not hitting, which connects quite a bit to this talk. Right. And then my specific role, so I'm the Forest Outreach Coordinator, and I am actually, that's a pretty new position, just started last summer actually, and it is a split position between the extension unit and McIntire-Stennis, which is within research. Okay. And then, so my position, similar to many of the things Dave talks about, very much focused on that outreach and education component with a focus on forestry and natural resources. And then it just so happens that landowners are a focus, but for me, youth is another area that I'm trying to focus on.
Absolutely, makes sense. And with this environmental education that we're talking about, so give us a little bit about this whole process of environmental education. I mean, you could say it covers a wide variety of things, but you specifically have, natural resources in mind.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. So, so I guess the first thing I'll just point out is kind of what's a definition of environmental education, and so one way that the EPA outlines that is a process that allows individuals to explore environmental issues, engage in problem solving, and take action to improve the environment. And so basically, of course, there's a lot of different types of education that happen, and another popular one is outdoor education. So where you have youth learning in the outdoors, and there's definitely some overlap with environmental education. But I would say some of the key components to think about with environmental ed is, are they doing some problem solving, and are they kind of being empowered to take some action as well, or some of the other pieces to think about. And so I think in our field, many of the different types of outreach and education that we do, I would think you could broadly capture in the umbrella of environmental education. And then another I think really key thing to point out is, so youth is an area that I'm focusing on when we're talking today, but of course environmental education is for all ages. So so we think a lot about K through 12, but I would argue that we could do a lot of the same stuff with college students just fine, and then all the way to the end.
Sure. Now, do you in the picture we just seen on your slide? I believe that's you.
Yep, it is.
Looks like you're looking at a tree cutting
Yep.
And are we aging it, or what are we
So-
teaching this young one?
So this was actually an example, and full disclosure, that is actually my child there in
Okay.
that picture.
Well,
And we're
great.
at a program, but you can always show a picture of your
Well, yeah.
child, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
but we are at the Family Forest event that I'm gonna actually plug at the end of this
Good.
talk. But that was
Good.
something at the Benton State Forest, and we had a station where we were really kind of promoting Project Learning Tree, which is a kind of prepackaged environmental ed program. And so at the station, we were looking at tree cookies, looking at talking with, depending on the age group, would vary exactly how we talked about it. But so he's 5, so with a smaller age group at that time, with the younger folks, we would just talk about, like, why is it that we see these tree rings, what's going on with our seasons and how that relates to what we see in the tree rings, and then them just investigating, like, where the rings change size and maybe counting how many, depending on if that's within the skill set or not. And then there's ways we can build on the activity. So you see the colored pencils there, they got a chance to draw their life as a tree on like a paper plate. And then there's a game that you can do with the activity as well, where they actually spread out like trees and they gather resources, such as I throw poker chips, and the poker chips represent space and nutrients and water, things that they might need, and then they have to kind of grab for those resources, sunlight, and they can look at, if trees are super packed together, then they may struggle a little more to get the resources.
Understand. Makes sense. Interesting. So, and again, we'll plug this event later, but it sounds like a great time, and I think it's always well received with the community and everything. But I guess a greater question would be, why do we have to worry about this whole environmental question, I should say?
Sure, absolutely. So I mean, I think probably I'm guessing most folks watching Tree Talk have bought into the importance of taking care of our natural resources. And so this is just a really important piece of the puzzle, and so some of the reasons, and of course there's a lot of different reasons, but this slide shares that there are a lot of different authors who have talked about the importance of, if youth are exposed to the environment, and that can be things like camping and spending times outdoors, as well as more formal environmental education. But we know that those types of experiences and exposure then directly connect to their likelihood to want to study that more, even in the in secondary education, but then on in college and post education, and then also contribute to their likelihood to maybe want to have a career that connects to that, which could be a wide range of things. And then I would take that a step further, and say that it also makes sense that they're more likely, even if they don't want to work in it, they're more likely to care about it, pay attention to it, live in a way that takes care of it, if they were exposed to some of those connections as a young person. So so that's one of those key reasons that we see this as really crucial. The other thing that I'd like to highlight here is, and something else I try to kind of keep weaving throughout this talk, is the idea of trying to make environmental education as inclusive as we can. And so there tend to be youth that we expose more to environmental education, and then some audiences that we tend to leave out more. And as we look at demographics and how things are changing, like we need to do a better job of making sure that we're reaching out to both rural and urban youth, and make sure that we're reaching out to youth of color as much as we're reaching out to white youth, are some other things to think about.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about educating about environment, I mean, we mentioned, that people who are watching the show probably already have a grasp of trees and things like that. But, there's also the other population that maybe doesn't own a forest of trees, but they still need to worry about the environment. I would assume. So even somebody that lives in town, who all, it should be everybody, I guess, in general, but who, it should be all, right? That should be dealing with environmental training, or however you want to, this whole education.
Right. So
how do you start?
Yeah, and kind of who all should be jumping in there. Okay,
yeah.
Great.
So who and when should you start, I guess?
Yeah, great.
Even though we're training the young ones, how do they do something? How could they do something?
Right. Okay. How could just anybody jump in, kind of, and who is that? Yeah. So I think I would say probably you, whoever's watching Tree Talk right now. And I do actually, I want to take a step back, and I should acknowledge a lot of this talk actually is from pieces from an article that we did recently around the importance of environmental education. And I want to acknowledge I did have two other folks who helped me write the article, Duane Rigsby, who's recently retired from the U.S. Forest Service, and Skylar Templeton, who is actually a current student graduating soon in natural resources from Penn State.
Gotcha.
So if anybody wants to hear more about this, you can contact me and we can give more detail. But we kind of brainstormed who should do EE, and really the answer is I hope everybody, if you're comfortable and want to be doing it. And so thinking beyond, I think a lot of times we put education on the educators, and I'd love it if there's educators watching. I'm sure they're already bought into this, but I think any educator also believes we can always kind of get new ideas and learn new things. But natural resources professionals, I think there's a lot of natural resources professionals who don't necessarily engage much in environmental education. And then I would also really like to encourage woodland owners to think more about it. And when I worked in Colorado, we actually did some programming targeted towards helping woodland owners think about what their role could be with environmental education. And then really just anyone who's an enthusiast about the environment, I think, can play a role. And partnering, I think, is really key too, because it can be overwhelming. I know sometimes I even will talk. My husband also has a forestry background, but he'll share. He's not the first one to jump in and say, sure, I'll do a youth program just of his own accord. But he does understand the value. But I think that, we have some professionals and partners who maybe are less comfortable, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Maybe find someone that you can collaborate with to help you break into that and push yourself out of that comfort zone a little bit.
Is there clubs or little organizations, not like a 4-H club could start doing environmental training, could they?
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
How would, I don't know, maybe you're just starting to target audiences now. Maybe that's something that we could target even?
Right, absolutely. I think that, and it's not as if, I think some of those things happen already, but yes, I think there's more of us who could kind of step up to the plate and regularly engage in, exposing those groups to how they can play a role in environmental education. And I think some of the obvious, low-hanging fruit would be like scouting groups or 4-H or maybe a natural resources club at Hocking College or Central State or Ohio State. But yeah, I think there are a lot of kind of missed opportunities there. I also think sometimes we overlook just like what's in front of our faces in terms of, like one of the easiest ways that a landowner could start would be with their own grandchildren. And I've had, or children, depending on your age, or a niece or a neighbor. But I've had landowners tell me that they would be interested in some more, maybe a little more training or some resources to help them. How do they engage in that type of education with some of their own family, their young family?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, then that's the next question: is how do you find all of these resources?
Some of these resources, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I know you're starting the project there, around Columbus, but I'm sure you have other places.
Yeah. So and actually, I would so there are folks all across the state who are already poised and ready to help folks with this. And so I'll plug a few of these resources that are already out there. But so of course the one that I talked about last time I was on Tree Talk as well. But I'm a huge fan of Project Learning Tree, and I'm actually a facilitator with that group, and I work on their board actually in Ohio. But this is a program. Wet and Wild, the first three up there, they all have like pre-packaged book and materials that if folks are interested, you can go to these websites and you can actually reach out to a state coordinator and basically find out when can I get a training in my area, and we can help you organize that. And so it's sometimes there's a small cost, but it isn't a high cost. It's like usually less than $30, I would say. And actually, some of those programs don't have to charge. It just depends on the funding of the program. But so there are awesome resources there. But most of the resources on those first three, you need to have a little training first before you can get the book and access to the full resources. However, I'd also say all those websites do have some information that you could start with and start to access right now. And the other really neat thing about why I would really encourage somebody to do these trainings if you haven't is it provides you more than just those resources. So you get to practice a few things with peers. So it just increases your comfort level in doing some environmental education. And then it also provides you a network, because you're in the room with, you get to know the people teaching to you, so they've been doing it for a little while. But you also then have this room of 10 or 20 people, however many are at this session, who you can then collaborate with, and a lot of times they're in your area, so
for future
it kind of helps you get started. And then I also highlighted NAEE, the National Association for Environmental Education, because of course they're kind of provide some great resources and standards as well.
Good. So Jamie, you've got another slide about who we should target. We talked about youth, but it could be a variety. And again, it's kind of this idea of, so personally, I mean, I'm going to say, if you want to do environmental education, wherever you start, I don't think you're doing it wrong. I mean, we need folks out there, boots on the ground, telling young people and all ages about why the environment is important, how they can engage in it. I know for forestry specifically, I think we're a discipline that sometimes has quite a bit of misunderstanding. I think if you're a forester, we worry about an educator who tells youth that you should never cut a tree down, and that's kind of an age-old thing that happens. So any environmental education, I think, is a good thing, but encouraging us all to try to target those that have the least access to the natural world, and those that maybe we haven't been targeting. So I would say, as a person who went through Girl Scouting, I think right away of Scouts and 4-H and FFA, and I think those are kind of low-hanging fruit, but I've been trying to encourage myself, think beyond that audience, and doesn't mean I don't do those programs still, but try to step outside that some more. And I think that's a good idea, because I think those kind of already have I'm not going to say a knowledge of it, but maybe a general knowledge of it, because they kind of are out in the woods or they're learning those activities. I would think even I'm not going to say a basketball group, but something to that effect would be even somebody that we would target that had no idea, maybe.
Right.
So, something to that effect.
Yeah,
And then how do you start them whole things would be the other question.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a good point you bring up the sports, because that's something that we know. And actually, Richard Louve's book, he writes about this concept of nature deficit disorder. It's an older book, but but there is this idea that we, for the most part, we tend to structure our children's lives quite a bit more. And so sometimes the exposure to the outdoors is the soccer field. Oh, yeah. But of course, that's not really the same as a non-structured walk through the woods and discussion about that. So yeah, I absolutely think thinking outside the box, basically, on who to target. And then I know one obvious one for me is I try to think of where are there programs where youth's parents are paying for the program versus where it's more of a free program, because that tells me those might be families that can't necessarily afford to just go to an eco camp or do these extra things. And so maybe that's a place to focus energy. But if sometimes it takes, I will say it's hard work sometimes to find those places in the community and take some persistence. And then of course there's the urban and the rural, which in Ohio we acknowledge that sometimes we're focusing on one and not the other, and how can we all do a better job if we work more in rural Ohio, how to connect with urban and vice versa. So
how do you tailor your stuff? Or do you, according to age, I assume, or groups maybe?
Yeah, so I think in terms of tailoring, it's yes, I think age is a really crucial thing to think about. It's kind of a good place to start. So I know for me, if for one, I've always been more comfortable actually with like high school, college, adult. So I will do a kindergarten program, but what I find with kindergarten or even before kindergarten is quicker attention span generally. So sometimes a 30-minute program and we're good. That's all the teacher wants.
That's your
all.
Limit.
Yeah, because then it's time to like move on to the next thing. I think another thing that can be helpful, so you're not overwhelmed by like, oh, what kind of program should I do, is to really, if you're going into a community center or a classroom, ask the lead on the room or the teacher, what are there certain learning outcomes that we need to hit or you're trying to hit. And a lot of times these books that I highlighted, like Project Learning Tree and Project WET, they actually have really good appendices that'll say, if you have this age group and you need a 45-minute program inside, here's some things that you could do. And then it'll even take you as far as, if you need to hit these topic areas, these are some programs that you can do. So I think those are some things to think about. I also think you just need to think about where you are. So sometimes you have to take a step back and learn more about where you're doing the programming. So I wouldn't recommend just go into a community that you don't know anything about and push messaging, because it may not resonate. You have to first understand some of what that community is experiencing with the environment and kind of what's going on there. So that always goes back to that PLT saying, how to think, not what to think.
I was about ready to mention that up there. I was like, I see. I liked your little quote there about that. So what else do you do with those youngsters, I guess, if you would? So
in terms of in terms of tailoring the program. Yeah.
So if you were to take your young group there, whether it's what was it, 5th grade, 4th grade, whatever, do you come back to those periodically, or do you just say, okay, one time and you're done?
That's a great question.
So maybe you're just tailoring, one 30-minute topic or 15-minute topic, and then you come back a week later, or how would you do programming, I guess, that way?
So I think as much as you can continue to go back to an audience, that is really productive, because you can build on the messaging and kind of keep moving forward. I think I've had opportunities where you can repeatedly go back and talk to a group, and you can build on those concepts.
Sure.
Sorry, Duane. What's nice about those prepackaged programs is they will help you do that as well. So they'll give you an idea. For example, April is Arbor Day and Earth Day. So I'm doing some programming specifically around that. So picking a theme. But some of those classrooms I may follow up with, and so I could pick an exercise, and then the book may tell me, hey, here's 1 or 2 other exercises that would connect with this one. So with future programming, I can continue to build off of that if I would like to. Yeah.
Now I know our time's getting close anyway. What you have some upcoming programs that you want to target?
Yes,
I know we talked about that at the beginning.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to plug. Yeah. So we encourage folks to collaborate, of course. And so one way to do that is to come to some of these types of programs and see where you can connect with folks who are doing some of this work already. And this could be sometimes some of these are really formal professional development opportunities, and some of them are kind of just the last one is kind of just for fun that you could do with your family. So the first one up there is Project Learning Tree Facilitator Training. So if you were really interested in, okay, how could I not only use this Project Learning Tree idea, but maybe you've already been exposed to it, and you would even want to go a step further and help be prepared to train folks in your community on this book and how they could use it. There is an opportunity for that in July, and the information is up there, but there is a registration cost for that, and I just encourage you to get in touch with Samantha Clyde there if you're interested in that, even just to gather more information. Another one that we have coming up in Southeast Ohio, we have a Teacher Field Days, which actually happens every summer. It does target educators. However, I would say if there is a woodland owner who is interested in getting more engaged with environmental education, they also could look at this event. And so this is in June. They're going to focus on birds and songs in the forest. They have a theme every summer, and you can contact Greg Smith regarding that one.
Gotcha.
And then the last one is our Family Day in the Woods, which this will be our second annual one. That's on Saturday, September 14th. That's a free event, open to everybody. Lots of cool stations, a sawmill, rattlesnakes, all kinds of things
It'll be a
going
good day.
on. And some of that's will be on Dave's Southeast Ohio website, but you can absolutely contact me for additional information on that as well.
I'm sure you'll be there at that event.
I will. I'm kind of helping coordinate it.
So, great. I know there's lots of activities out there at the Vinton Park area, so we'll look for other programs as we come along. But our time has ended. And Jamie, great having you with us, and maybe we'll do it again here soon. But until next time, we will see everyone later.
Thanks.